Imagine walking into your favorite cafe, the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. You've had a long day, and all you want is to sit in a quiet corner, enjoy your drink, and escape from the world for just a moment. But as you settle into your chair, something unexpected happens. Your phone rings, and it's a call you didn't expect, from a person you haven't spoken to in years. Now, ask yourself, what could they possibly want? Why now, of all times, do they reach out to you? This kind of real-life scenario, simple yet filled with possibilities, pulls you into the story, inviting you to wonder about the motivations, the past, and the future. It's a moment of intrigue that we can all relate to: a chance encounter, an unexpected message, a sudden disruption in our daily routine. What happens next? That's the question you're left with, as your curiosity nudges you further into the unfolding narrative. As we dive into the rest of the story, let's explore the emotions, conflicts, and hidden motivations that lie beneath these seemingly mundane moments in life. The Galactic Council chamber echoed with laughter, the kind of derisive, mocking sound that could break even the most stalwart of spirits. 3 alien women, their skin shimmering with shades of blue and violet, stood at the center, eyes sparkling with a mixture of amusement and disdain. They were from Nix 13, a planet so far advanced from Earth that they had considered the little blue orb nothing more than a primitive backwater. Their sleek, glowing bodies radiated an otherworldly beauty, and they reveled in the fact that Earth was light years behind them in technology, intelligence, and evolution. Earth was a joke to them. To Inara, Zyra, and Viana, Earth and its inhabitants were nothing but a cosmic plaything, a source of endless amusement. They'd watched humans through their sophisticated intergalactic surveillance systems, laughing at their bumbling attempts to explore space, their rudimentary technology, and their quaint notions of love, relationships, and family. The Nexians had long transcended such primitive concepts, focusing their energies on science, art, and the pursuit of eternal knowledge. How quaint, Inara had once said, her lips curled into a sneer as she watched humans on Earth engage in their clumsy, emotional bonds. They still mate for life. How primitive. Why would anyone tie themselves down to a single partner? Zyra added, her laughter ringing through the grand halls of the Nexian capital. The very idea of love is outdated. Obsolete. Viana, the youngest of the 3, was the most curious. Despite her disdain for Earth, she often found herself watching more than the others, her large violet eyes narrowing as she observed human interactions. Something about the way humans connected with each other, the intensity of their emotions, piqued her interest. But she would never admit that all changed when they were sent on a mission to Earth. The High Command of Nix 13 had deemed it necessary to study Earth up close, to truly understand its weaknesses. The planet had recently shown signs of developing technology that, while laughable compared to Nexian standards, could pose a potential threat if left unchecked. Inara, Zyra, and Viana were tasked with infiltrating Earth, blending in, and learning more about its inhabitants. They were to return with information that would help Nix 13 decide whether Earth was worth keeping on the galactic radar, or whether it should be eradicated entirely. The 3 women arrived on Earth, disguising themselves as human women, though their otherworldly beauty and allure made them stand out wherever they went. Men were drawn to them like moths to a flame, their every move causing heads to turn and hearts to race. But one man, in particular, caught their attention. His name was Luke, an unassuming biologist who worked at a local university. Unlike the other men, who ogled and fawned over the alien women, Luke was different. He didn't stumble over his words when he spoke to them, nor did he try to impress them with hollow compliments. In fact, he seemed indifferent to their beauty, more interested in his research on Earth's ecosystems than the 3 mysterious women who had suddenly appeared in his life. This intrigued them. He's different, Viana said one night as they watched Luke from a distance. He doesn't behave like the others. He's a fool, Inara scoffed. Too focused on his trivial work to notice anything else. Typical human. But Zyra, the most logical of the 3, was intrigued by Luke's intellect. Perhaps there's more to him than we thought, she mused. We should observe him more closely. And so, they did. As weeks passed, the 3 women found themselves inexplicably drawn to Luke. His intelligence, his quiet confidence, and his ability to see beyond their physical beauty fascinated them. Despite their initial mission to mock and study Earth, they couldn't help but feel something else, a strange, unfamiliar pull toward this human man. Vienna was the first to act on her feelings. One night, unable to resist the curiosity that had been building inside her, she approached Luke while he was working late in his lab. "Why do you care so much about this planet?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with curiosity. Luke looked up, surprised to see her there. "Because it's my home," he said simply. "Every creature, every plant, every river and mountain, it all has a purpose. It's all connected. I care because it matters." Vienna blinked, taken aback by the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, she felt something stir inside her, something she had never experienced before. Could it be emotion? No, it couldn't be. She was Neaction. They had evolved beyond such things, but as the days turned into weeks, Vienna found herself spending more and more time with Luke. Inara and Zyra noticed the change in her, but they were too preoccupied with their own growing fascination with the human to confront her about it. Before long, all three women found themselves inexplicably drawn to Luke. They couldn't explain it, couldn't understand why this one human had such an effect on them. They had come to Earth to mock it, to study it, but now they were entangled in something far more complex. One night, under the glow of the full moon, everything changed. Luke, unaware of the full truth about the three women, had invited them to a small gathering at his home. It was a quiet evening, filled with laughter and conversation. But as the night wore on, something shifted. The air became thick with tension, and the unspoken connection between Luke and the three alien women became impossible to ignore. And then, in a moment of passion and curiosity, boundaries were crossed. The Neaxians, who had once scoffed at the idea of love, found themselves entwined with a human man in ways they had never imagined. It was more than just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, something beyond the comprehension of their highly advanced minds. What they didn't realize was that this union would have consequences. Weeks later, back on their ship, the three women began to feel strange. Their bodies, once sleek and perfect, were changing. Inara was the first to notice, her usual sharp wit dulled by waves of nausea. Zyra, the most logical of the group, ran tests, her violet eyes widening in disbelief as the results came back. They were pregnant. "How is this possible?" Inara whispered, her voice trembling for the first time in her life. "It shouldn't be," Zyra said, her hands shaking as she reviewed the data. "Our species isn't compatible with humans. This shouldn't be happening." But it was happening. And as their bodies continued to change, so did their minds. The cold, calculating nature of the Neaxians was being replaced by something warmer, something more human. They began to experience emotions they had long thought beneath them: fear, love, protectiveness. Vienna, who had always been the most curious about human emotions, was the first to embrace the change. "Maybe this is what we were missing," she said softly one night as she cradled her growing belly. "Maybe this is what it means to truly live." But Inara and Zyra were terrified. They had come to Earth to mock it, to study it, not to become a part of it. They had never planned for this. As their pregnancies progressed, the women found themselves struggling with their new reality. They couldn't return to Nike's 13, not like this. Their people would never accept them, never understand what had happened. They were outcasts now, exiled by their own biology. But Luke, ever the steady presence in their lives, stood by them. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain: he cared for these women, alien or not. And as the months passed, he became their anchor, helping them navigate the complexities of human life and love. When the children were born, the world changed for Inara, Zyra, and Vienna. The cold, logical Neaxians had become mothers, and with that came a profound sense of purpose. They had laughed at Earth once, but now they understood its beauty, its fragility, and its importance. They had come to Earth as conquerors, but they stayed as something far more powerful, a family. And in the end, it was love, primitive, outdated, human love, that saved them all. Chapter 2: The weight of parenthood. The first days after the birth of their children felt surreal. Each of the alien women experienced something completely foreign to them, the overwhelming sense of vulnerability and protectiveness. Vianna, who had always been the most open to human emotions, found herself almost instinctively caring for her child, a small, blue-skinned girl with delicate human features and large violet eyes. Her heart swelled in ways she couldn't explain. Inara and Zaira, on the other hand, struggled with their newfound emotions. Inara, ever the most dominant and proud, found herself feeling weak. The powerlessness that came with love made her question everything about her former life. She spent hours pacing the halls of their hideout, clutching her newborn son to her chest, while her mind churned with uncertainty. She had once been a leader, revered on Nike's 13. Now, she was tethered to a being that relied on her for survival, and that terrified her. Zaira was no different. The most logical of the group, she spent countless hours analyzing her child, running tests, gathering data, and trying to understand how this had all happened. How could an Eaxian, so genetically advanced, conceive a child with a human? Every analysis led her to the same conclusion: the children were miracles. And that conclusion led her to question everything about her people's superiority. The love that bloomed in her heart for her daughter, a child she had never wanted, was impossible to ignore. Luke, ever the steady and compassionate man, continued to be their lifeline. Despite the sheer strangeness of the situation, he accepted the 3 women and their children without hesitation. He moved them into his home, a small but comfortable place on the outskirts of town. It was there, surrounded by the simplicity of Earth's natural beauty, that the alien women began to truly understand what it meant to be human. Chapter 3: The Fragility of Earth. As the weeks passed, Inara, Zaira, and Vianna learned to navigate the complexities of Earth life, all while caring for their newborns. Luke helped them adapt to human culture, teaching them everything from how to shop for groceries to how to interact with others without arousing suspicion. The women, though brilliant and powerful in their own right, struggled with the mundanity of human existence. One evening, as they sat together on Luke's porch, watching the stars, Vianna voiced the question that had been on all their minds: "Do you ever miss Nike's 13? Inara, who had been staring at the night sky in silence, finally spoke. "I miss the power. I miss the control." But, she glanced down at her son, who was asleep in her arms. "I wouldn't trade this for anything." Zaira nodded, her gaze fixed on her daughter, who was playing with a small toy on the ground. "We were wrong," she said quietly. "We thought Earth was primitive because of its emotions. But maybe that's what makes it advanced." Luke smiled gently. "Emotions aren't weaknesses," he said. "They're what make us human. They connect us. They give us purpose." The women sat in contemplative silence, the weight of his words sinking in. For so long, they had believed that their lack of emotions made them superior. But now, as mothers, they realized that emotions were not a burden, they were a gift. Chapter 4: The Return of the Neaxians. Just as they began to settle into their new lives, a shadow loomed over them. One night, a familiar hum echoed in the distance, a sound that sent chills down their spines. It was the unmistakable sound of an Eaxian ship. Inara, Zaira, and Vianna rushed outside, their hearts pounding. In the sky above, they saw the sleek, black vessel descending toward the Earth. "They've found us," Zaira whispered, her voice trembling. Luke, who had never seen the Neaxian ships before, stared in awe. "What do we do?" he asked. Inara's face hardened with resolve. "We fight." But as the ship landed, a sense of dread filled the air. This was no ordinary Neaxian vessel, it was a warship. The doors hissed open, and out stepped a figure that made Inara's blood run cold. It was Commander Thal, the ruthless leader of the Neaxian military, and behind him stood an army of Neaxian soldiers. "You have betrayed us," Thal's voice boomed, his eyes filled with fury as he looked at Inara, Zaira, and Vianna. "You were sent to study Earth, not to fraternize with its people." Inara stepped forward, her chin held high. "We have not betrayed you. We have evolved." Thal's eyes narrowed. "You have become weak. You have allowed yourselves to be tainted by human emotions. You have disgraced the Neaxian people." Zaira, her voice calm but firm, spoke next. "We have discovered something greater than ourselves. Something that your rigid laws and cold logic could never understand." Thal sneered. And what is that? Love, Diana said softly, stepping forward with her child in her arms. We have learned what it means to love, to care, to protect. It is not weakness. It is strength. Thal's eyes flickered with something, perhaps confusion, perhaps curiosity, but it was quickly replaced by anger. You are coming with us, he said, his voice laced with venom. Your children will be taken for study, and you will be punished for your betrayal. Inara's heart pounded in her chest. She knew they couldn't let that happen. She glanced at Luke, who was standing protectively by their side, and then at her son, who was asleep in her arms. We won't let you take them, she said, her voice steady. Thal's lips curled into a cruel smile. You don't have a choice. Chapter 5, The Battle for Earth. What followed was a battle unlike anything Earth had ever seen. The Nexian soldiers, armed with advanced technology and weaponry, descended upon the small town, intent on capturing the alien women and their children. But Inara, Zaira, and Viana, fueled by their newfound love and protectiveness, fought back with a ferocity that even the Nexians hadn't anticipated. Luke, though a human, refused to stand idly by. He fought alongside the women, using his knowledge of Earth's terrain and resources to outsmart the Nexian forces. Together, they formed a formidable team, and for the first time, the Nexians found themselves on the defensive. As the battle raged on, Inara found herself face to face with Thal. He was stronger, faster, and more powerful than any foe she had ever faced, but she wasn't afraid. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her child, for Luke, for the life she had come to cherish on Earth. You think love makes you strong? Thal sneered as they clashed. It has made you weak, Inara. You could have ruled the stars, and instead, you are bound to this insignificant planet. Inara's eyes blazed with determination. I have learned that power without love is meaningless. You may rule with fear, Thal, but we will win with love. With one final surge of strength, Inara defeated Thal, sending him crashing to the ground. The remaining Nexian soldiers, seeing their commander defeated, retreated in fear, their warship disappearing into the night sky. Chapter 6, A New Beginning. When the battle was over, the town lay in ruins, but Earth was safe. Inara, Zaira, and Viana, though exhausted and wounded, stood tall, their children in their arms. They had fought for their future, for the future of their children, and they had won. As they looked out over the horizon, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds, they knew that they had found something far more valuable than power or control. They had found love, family, and purpose. Luke stood beside them, his arm around Inara's shoulders. What now? He asked quietly. Inara smiled, her heart full. Now, we live. And so, they did. Together, they built a new life on Earth, one filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. They had come to Earth as conquerors, but they stayed as something far more powerful, a family. Chapter 7, Life among the ruins. In the months following the battle with the Nexian forces, Earth remained a fragile and wounded place, its cities still showing the scars from the brief but brutal conflict. The small town that had been their sanctuary was now rebuilding, with people slowly returning to their homes. The alien women, Inara, Zaira, and Viana, had become something of legends, whispered about among the local people who had witnessed their extraordinary powers and courage in defending the planet. But as the world continued to move forward, so too did the challenges for the trio of alien mothers. Now, they were not just warriors, they were caretakers, and the small, but growing hybrid children in their arms demanded their attention in ways they never could have anticipated. These children, part human and part Nexian, were unlike anything Earth had ever seen, and the women knew that, one day, the world would take notice. Viana, the most maternal and open of the three, found herself embracing this new role of motherhood with a grace she hadn't expected. Her daughter, a bright-eyed girl with delicate features and pale blue skin, had inherited her mother's curiosity and intelligence. She was developing rapidly, showing signs of both human and Nexian abilities at an early age. Viana often wondered what her daughter's future would hold, what her place would be in this world, torn between two species. Inara, on the other hand, struggled with the softer, emotional side of motherhood. While her son, with his deep violet eyes and strong frame, brought her joy, she couldn't shake the fear that still lingered in her heart. She had been a warrior all her life, bred for dominance and control. Love made her vulnerable, and that vulnerability felt like a weakness she couldn't afford. But every time her son smiled at her, she felt her icy exterior crack. Bit by bit, Zaira was perhaps the most conflicted. Her daughter was quiet, introspective, and possessed an intelligence that far surpassed that of any human child. Zaira spent countless hours studying her, taking notes on her physical and mental development. It was both fascinating and terrifying to watch her child evolve into something entirely new. The scientist in her was enthralled by the possibilities, but the mother in her worried about the implications. What would happen when the world discovered these hybrid children? Would they be accepted or feared? Luke, ever the grounding presence, had seamlessly integrated into their lives. He had become not only a father figure to the children, but also a steady source of love and support for the three women. His calm, logical demeanor balanced their intensity, and his devotion to them was unwavering. But even he knew that their peaceful existence couldn't last forever. Chapter 8, Rising Tensions. It wasn't long before the world took notice of the extraordinary events that had transpired in their small town. News of the Nexian invasion spread across the globe, though much of it was shrouded in conspiracy theories and misinformation. Some believed that the entire event had been a government cover-up, while others speculated that Earth had finally made contact with extraterrestrial life. But for those who had witnessed the battle firsthand, there was no question, something had changed. Governments and scientists from around the world began to investigate, searching for answers. Satellites were launched, secret research programs were initiated, and the quiet town became a hub of interest for the world's most powerful institutions. Inara, Zaira, and Vianna knew it was only a matter of time before they would have to reveal the truth, or face the consequences. One evening, as they sat together in the dim light of Luke's home, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on them. The children, now a few years old, played quietly nearby, unaware of the growing danger. "We can't hide forever," Inara said, her voice tense. "The world is watching, and it's only a matter of time before they come for us." "We knew this day would come," Zaira replied, her eyes scanning the holographic data she had gathered on their children's development. "Our children are anomalies. They are both human and Nexian, something that's never been seen before. The scientific community will want to study them, and the governments, they'll see them as threats." Vianna, ever the optimist, shook her head. "They're not threats. They're just children. We need to show the world that." Luke, sitting quietly at the edge of the room, finally spoke. "We need to be smart about this. If we reveal the truth, we need to control the narrative. We can't let fear dictate what happens next." But controlling the narrative was easier said than done. The world's most powerful nations were already on high alert, and secretive organizations had begun hunting for any evidence of extraterrestrial life. It wasn't long before they found what they were looking for. Chapter 9, Captured. One night, as the children slept soundly in their beds, the peaceful home they had built was shattered. The sound of helicopters filled the air, followed by the heavy thud of military boots on the ground. Inara was the first to react, leaping to her feet as soldiers surrounded the house, weapons drawn. "They've found us," she hissed, her eyes blazing with fury. Zaira quickly gathered the children, pulling them close as the front door was kicked open. Luke stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Please," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "We don't want any trouble." But the soldiers weren't here to negotiate. They had come to take the alien women and their children, by force, if necessary. Inara and Vianna stood their ground, their eyes narrowing as they prepared to fight. But Zaira, ever the strategist, knew that resistance would only lead to more violence. "We have to go with them," she said quietly, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. "If we fight, they'll hurt the children." Reluctantly, Inara lowered her fists, and the three women were escorted out of the house, their children clutched tightly in their arms. Luke watched helplessly as they were loaded into the waiting helicopters, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. Chapter 10, The Secret Facility. The alien women and their children were taken to a top-secret government facility, hidden deep within the mountains. There, they were subjected to a series of tests, interrogations, and experiments. Scientists and military personnel watched their every move, fascinated and fearful of the hybrid beings in their care. The children, though young, could sense the tension in the air. They clung to their mothers, their large violet eyes wide with confusion and fear. Inara, Vianna, and Zyra did their best to protect them, but they were powerless in the face of the advanced technology that surrounded them. For weeks, they were kept in isolation, their every move monitored and recorded. But as time went on, the women began to realize that they weren't just prisoners, they were subjects. The scientists were studying them, trying to unlock the secrets of their biology and understand the unique combination of human and Neoxian DNA that their children possessed. Zyra, ever the scientist, couldn't help but be intrigued by their findings. She had always been fascinated by the blending of their two species, and now, she had access to the most advanced technology on Earth to study it. But her curiosity was tempered by her maternal instincts. She knew that, while the scientists were interested in their children's potential, the military saw them as weapons. Inara, on the other hand, was filled with rage. She had once been a warrior, a leader of her people, and now she was a prisoner, held captive by the very species she had once ridiculed. But as much as she wanted to fight, she knew that her first priority was protecting her son. Vianna, ever the most empathetic of the three, tried to make peace with their captors. She spoke to the scientists, trying to explain that they weren't a threat, that their children were just like any other children. But her words fell on deaf ears. The humans were too blinded by fear to see the truth. Chapter 11, Escape. As the days turned into weeks, Inara, Zyra, and Vianna knew that they couldn't stay in the facility forever. Their children were growing stronger every day, and it was only a matter of time before the military saw them as too dangerous to keep alive. "We have to get out of here," Inara said one night as they huddled together in their cell. "Before it's too late." Zyra nodded, her mind already working on a plan. "I've been studying the facility's security systems. If we can disable the main control room, we'll have a chance to escape." Vianna looked down at her daughter, who was asleep in her lap. "But where will we go?" "They'll hunt us down." "We'll figure that out later," Inara said, her eyes blazing with determination. "Right now, we need to get our children out of here." The plan was risky, but they had no choice. With Zyra's knowledge of the facility's systems, they were able to disable the security cameras and sneak past the guards. They made their way to the control room, where Zyra quickly hacked into the system and shut down the facility's power grid. For a brief moment, everything went dark. It was their chance. They ran, carrying their children through the labyrinth of hallways. Chapter 12, The Great Escape. The moment the facility plunged into darkness, the hum of machinery died, and the three alien women felt a surge of hope mixed with terror. This was their only chance, there would be no second attempt. Zyra moved quickly, her fingers flying across the control panel as she rerouted power to open the main doors. "We only have a few minutes before they realize what's happening," she whispered to Inara and Vianna, who stood ready, their children held tightly against them. The massive metal doors slid open with a hiss. Inara led the way. Her heart pounded in her chest, not out of fear for herself, but for her son, the boy who had come to mean more to her than any title or power ever had. She could hear the distant shouts of soldiers, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. "We need to get to the surface," Zyra said breathlessly, her mind already mapping the quickest route out of the labyrinthine facility. "There's an emergency exit near the northwest wing." With Vianna bringing up the rear, the group moved swiftly through the hallways, their footsteps echoing in the cold, sterile corridors. Alarms blared behind them, and the facility's backup generators kicked in, bathing everything in a sickly red light. Suddenly, soldiers appeared ahead, blocking their path. Inara reacted instinctively, raising her hand as a pulse of energy shot from her palm, sending the soldiers flying backward. Their weapons clattered to the ground as they collapsed in a heap. Unconscious, but alive, Luke, who had been brought to the facility shortly after the women's capture, appeared at the junction ahead, his face pale but determined. He had managed to free himself in the chaos, knowing that he had to find them. "This way," he shouted, beckoning them toward him. Together, they bolted down the hallway, narrowly avoiding another squad of soldiers. The sounds of gunfire echoed in the distance, but they didn't stop. Not until they reached the emergency exit, where a small shuttle had been left behind by the Nexian retrieval teams, an oversight that would now be their salvation. Zyra quickly assessed the controls and got to work. "I can get this shuttle online," she muttered, her fingers deftly manipulating the alien interface. "But it's going to take a minute." "We don't have a minute," Inara growled, glancing nervously over her shoulder. She could feel the weight of their pursuers closing in, and every instinct in her body screamed at her to protect her son. The door behind them burst open, and soldiers poured into the hangar. Luke, without hesitation, grabbed a discarded rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. "Stay back," he shouted, positioning himself between the soldiers and the shuttle. It bought them just enough time. The shuttle roared to life, its engines glowing blue as Zyra finished her work. "Get in," she shouted. One by one, they scrambled inside, the children held close as the door sealed shut behind them. Inara grabbed the controls, taking the pilot's seat, and without a moment's hesitation, she launched the shuttle into the air. The force of the takeoff slammed them back into their seats as they shot toward the sky, leaving the soldiers far below. For the first time in what felt like forever, they were free. Chapter 13. On the run, the shuttle tore through the atmosphere, the earth shrinking beneath them as they ascended into the dark void of space. For a moment, the only sound was the steady hum of the engines and the distant cries of the children. Confused and frightened by the sudden chaos, Luke reached over to take Inara's hand, squeezing it gently. "We made it," he said softly, though the words felt hollow. They had escaped, but they were far from safe. Inara's jaw tightened. "For now," she replied, her eyes scanning the control panel. "But they won't stop. They'll hunt us." Zyra, sitting in the co-pilot seat, nodded grimly. "She's right. Earth's governments won't just let us disappear. And we've seen what they're willing to do to capture us." Diana, holding her daughter close, looked out at the stars, her heart heavy. "Where do we go?" she asked quietly. "We can't stay on Earth, but we don't have anywhere else." Silence fell over the group as they all realized the enormity of their situation. The Nexians had exiled them, and now Earth was hunting them. They were fugitives in a galaxy that had no place for them. Their children, half human and half Nexian, were anomalies, beings that neither species fully understood. "We'll find somewhere," Luke said, his voice steady. "We always do." But the weight of his words hung in the air. They had no home. No safe place. And they couldn't run forever. Chapter 14. The Hidden World. As the weeks passed, the group traveled through the galaxy, hopping from one planet to the next in search of sanctuary. But wherever they went, they were met with suspicion, fear, and hostility. The presence of the Nexian-human hybrid children made them a target, and the threat of both Earth and Nexian forces loomed large over their heads. It wasn't until they stumbled upon a remote, uncharted planet that they finally found a glimmer of hope. The planet, known only as Riven, was a lush, green world on the edge of the galaxy. It had no formal government, no military presence, and no real population to speak of. It was a forgotten place, hidden from the rest of the universe by its dense forests and treacherous mountain ranges. For the first time in months, they felt a sense of peace. "This could be it," Diana said softly as they stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the vast expanse of the planet's wilderness. "A place where we can live in peace. Where our children can grow up free." Inara, who had always been the most cautious, nodded slowly. "It's isolated. It's perfect." Luke smiled, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "It's not much, but it's home." And so, they began to build a new life on Riven. It wasn't easy. There were no modern conveniences, no advanced technology to rely on, but they made do. They built a small home in the mountains, hidden from the rest of the galaxy, and for a time, they lived in peace. The children, now growing rapidly, thrived in the wilderness. They were strong, intelligent, and curious, their unique blend of human and Nexian genetics making them unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Inara, Zyra, and Diana watched with a mixture of pride and awe as their children grew into powerful beings, capable of extraordinary feats. But even as they built their new lives, they knew that the peace they had found was fragile. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and they couldn't hide forever. Chapter 15. The return of Thal. Their peaceful existence was shattered one night when a familiar sound echoed through the skies. The deep, resonating hum of a Neoxian warship cut through the air, sending a chill down Inara's spine. "He's back," she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. "Thal." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "How did he find us?" There was no time for answers. The warship descended over the mountains, its massive form blocking out the stars as it landed in the valley below. Soldiers poured out, their black armor glinting in the moonlight. At the head of the army stood Commander Thal, his eyes burning with fury. "I told you I would come for you," he snarled, his voice echoing through the night. "You thought you could run. You thought you could hide. But you are Neoxian. You belong to us." Inara, her hands clenched into fists, stepped forward, her eyes blazing with defiance. "We belong to no one," she spat. "Not anymore." Thal's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We'll see about that." Chapter 16. The final battle. The battle that followed was fierce and brutal, unlike anything they had ever faced. Thal's forces were relentless, determined to capture the hybrid children and bring the alien women back to Nix 13 for punishment. But Inara, Zyra, and Vienna were no longer the women they had once been. They were mothers now, warriors fighting for their children, for their freedom, for their very existence. And they would not go down without a fight. With Luke by their side, they fought back with everything they had. The children, now old enough to understand the gravity of the situation, used their unique powers to defend their home, their abilities far surpassing those of the Neoxian soldiers. The battle raged on for hours, the sound of gunfire and explosions filling the air. But slowly, one by one, Thal's forces began to fall, and then, at the height of the battle, Inara faced Thal once again. "You've lost," she said, her voice steady as she stood over him, her son at her side. "It's over." Thal, bloodied and beaten, glared up at her. "This isn't over," he spat. "You'll never be free. You'll always be hunted." Inara shook her head. "Not anymore." With one final blow, she ended it. Chapter 17. Chapter 17. A new future. The dawn broke gently over the rugged landscape of Riven, casting a golden light across the valley. The air was still thick with the smoke of the battle, but it was finally over. Commander Thal and his forces lay defeated, their warship in ruins. Inara stood tall, her body bruised and battered, but victorious. She looked down at her son, who clung to her hand, his large violet eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. "It's over, isn't it?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling. Inara knelt down to his level, cupping his small face in her hands. "Yes, it's over. You're safe now." Luke approached from behind, his arms outstretched as he enveloped both Inara and her son in a tight embrace. "We did it," he whispered, his voice filled with relief. Zyra and Vienna stood nearby, their children nestled close to them, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, but alive. The tension that had filled their lives for so long began to melt away as they realized that, for the first time in years, they were free. As the smoke cleared, the group gathered in the remains of their home, now a battlefield turned sanctuary. They knew that the galaxy would always be a dangerous place, filled with forces that sought to control or destroy what they didn't understand. But for now, they had earned their peace. The hybrid children, now old enough to comprehend the weight of what had transpired, stood with a quiet resolve. They were more than just the sum of their human and Neoxian parts. They were something new, something unique, and they understood that their very existence had changed the course of history. Chapter 18. A new alliance. As the group settled back into their lives on Riven, they received an unexpected visitor. A small shuttle appeared on the horizon one morning, landing cautiously near their home. From it emerged a group of Neoxian diplomats, their expressions unreadable as they approached the remnants of the battle. Inara and the others tensed, preparing for yet another confrontation, but the diplomats held up their hands in a gesture of peace. "We are not here to fight," one of them said, her voice soft but firm. "We come on behalf of the Neoxian High Council." Zyra, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. "Why are you here?" The diplomat hesitated for a moment before speaking. We have been monitoring the events on Earth and Riven. The High Council has decided that it is time to negotiate. We wish to establish a new alliance, one that will ensure the safety of your children. Inara's eyes narrowed. And why should we trust you? The diplomat met her gaze evenly. Because we have seen what your children can do. They are not just Nexian or human, they are the future of both our species. The High Council believes that by working together, we can protect them and ensure their place in the galaxy. Vianna, ever the optimist, stepped forward, her daughter at her side. We don't want war. We just want peace. The diplomat nodded. And that is what we are offering. An alliance. A chance to build a future where your children can thrive, free from the fear of persecution. Luke, standing beside Inara, spoke up. What guarantees do we have that this won't just be another trap? The diplomat's gaze softened. You have my word. The Nexian people have learned from their mistakes. We no longer wish to conquer, we wish to coexist. The group exchanged glances, uncertainty weighing heavily in the air. But after everything they had been through, the idea of peace, of safety for their children, was too tempting to ignore. Inara, after a long moment of silence, finally nodded. We will consider your offer. Chapter 19, The Children's Legacy. The years passed, and the hybrid children grew into young adults, their powers and abilities becoming more refined with each passing day. They were faster, stronger, and more intelligent than any human or Nexian before them. But what truly set them apart was their empathy, their ability to understand and connect with others in ways that neither species had ever been able to. Under the guidance of their parents, the children began to take on leadership roles in the new alliance between Earth and Nex-13. They traveled between planets, fostering peace and understanding, using their unique abilities to bridge the gap between the two species. The galaxy, once filled with conflict and division, began to change. Slowly, but surely, the influence of the hybrid children spread, and with it came a new era of cooperation and unity. The warships that had once patrolled the skies were replaced by research vessels and diplomatic envoys. The weapons of the past were laid down in favor of dialogue and collaboration. Inara, Zyra, and Vianna watched with pride as their children took their place in the galaxy. They had once been outcasts, hunted and feared, but now they were seen as the future, beacons of hope in a galaxy that had long been defined by its conflicts. Luke, ever the steady presence in their lives, remained by their side. He had once been a simple biologist, content to study Earth's ecosystems. Now, he was the father of a new generation of leaders, a man who had helped change the course of history through his quiet strength and unwavering love. Together, they had built a family that had not only survived, but had thrived in the face of unimaginable odds. Chapter 20, The Final Frontier. As the years turned into decades, the galaxy entered a new golden age. The hybrid children, now adults, led the charge in exploring the farthest reaches of space, discovering new worlds, new species, and new possibilities. They were pioneers, uniting the galaxy in ways that had once seemed impossible. Their legacy was one of peace, of understanding, and of love, the very things that had once been seen as weaknesses, but had proven to be their greatest strengths. Inara, Zyra, and Vianna, now older but no less formidable, watched as their children took to the stars. They had once been warriors, conquerors, and outcasts. But now, they were something far more important. They were mothers, the matriarchs of a new era, and as they stood together, watching the stars, they knew that their journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new threats, and new discoveries. But they would face them together, as a family, because in the end, it wasn't power or control that had saved them, it was love, and love, as they had learned, was the most powerful force in the universe. Chapter 21, The Dawn of New Worlds, Part 1. As the galaxy continued to evolve under the influence of the hybrid children, a new challenge presented itself: exploration. The galaxy, though vast and filled with mysteries, had been mapped and divided by various civilizations over millennia. But there were still places that even the most advanced species had yet to discover. The hybrid children, now fully grown and equipped with the wisdom of both their human and Nexian heritage, were eager to explore these uncharted territories. It was during one of these expeditions that they encountered something entirely unexpected. The hybrid fleet, a combination of human and Neoxian ships, was equipped with the most advanced technology both species had to offer. The fleet was commanded by Inara's son, Aaron, a young man who had inherited his mother's fierce determination and his father Luke's thoughtful demeanor. His reputation as a fearless explorer and capable leader had already spread throughout the galaxy, and many looked to him for guidance as the hybrid children led this new era of peace and exploration. The mission they were on was simple enough: explore the uncharted sectors of the Helios cluster, a dense region of space that had long been avoided by both human and Neoxian explorers due to its dangerous nebulas and unpredictable gravitational anomalies. But the hybrid children saw it as a challenge, and they were determined to uncover its secrets. Approaching the edge of the Helios Nebula, Aaron announced to his crew. The bridge of his ship, the Elysium, hummed with quiet anticipation as the crew prepared for whatever lay ahead. Beside him stood his sister, Lyra, who was as skilled in navigation and diplomacy as Aaron was in combat and leadership. Lyra had always been the more thoughtful of the two, preferring to resolve conflicts with words rather than weapons. Her calm demeanor and sharp intellect made her indispensable during these missions. "Scanners are picking up something," Lyra said, her violet eyes narrowing as she studied the data streaming across her console. "It's faint, but there's definitely something out there." Aaron leaned over to look at the readings. "Is it another ship?" Lyra shook her head. "No. It's strange. Almost like a structure, but it's not giving off any recognizable energy signatures." "Could it be debris from an old colony?" Aaron asked, though he knew the answer was unlikely. The Helios cluster had never been inhabited, as far as anyone knew. "Let's find out," Lyra said with a small smile, her curiosity piqued. The Elysium moved closer to the strange signal, and as they breached the outer edges of the nebula, the sight that greeted them was beyond anything they could have imagined. In the midst of the swirling gases of the nebula stood a massive structure, unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was ancient, its surface covered in strange glyphs and symbols that neither human nor Neoxian technology could decipher. The structure seemed to pulse with an almost organic energy, as if it were alive. "What is that?" Aaron muttered, his eyes wide with awe. Lyra shook her head, equally stunned. "I have no idea. But whatever it is, it's been here for a very, very long time." "Do we approach?" Aaron asked, turning to his sister. Lyra hesitated. "We don't know what it is. It could be dangerous. But it could also be the discovery of a lifetime," Aaron countered, his eyes gleaming with the same adventurous spirit that had defined his mother's life. Lyra nodded slowly. "We should proceed with caution. Send out a probe first. Let's see if we can get some readings before we get too close." The crew quickly deployed a probe, sending it toward the ancient structure. The data it sent back was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The structure was composed of materials that didn't exist anywhere else in the known galaxy, and its energy signature was constantly shifting, making it impossible to get a clear reading. "This is incredible," Lyra breathed as she studied the data. "It's like nothing we've ever seen before." Aaron grinned. "Let's get closer." As the Elysium moved toward the structure, a strange feeling began to settle over the crew. It was subtle at first, a faint sense of unease that none of them could quite place. But as they drew nearer, the feeling intensified, becoming a tangible presence that weighed heavily on their minds. "Do you feel that?" Lyra asked, her voice barely a whisper. Aaron nodded, his brow furrowing. "It's like something's watching us." Before they could react, the structure suddenly came to life. A pulse of energy shot out from its core, enveloping the Elysium in a blinding light. Alarms blared throughout the ship as systems began to fail one by one, and the crew scrambled to regain control. "What's happening?" Aaron shouted, gripping the armrests of his chair as the ship lurched violently. "I don't know." Lyra shouted back, frantically working at her console. "The energy from the structure, it's interfering with our systems. We're losing power." The ship buckled under the force of the energy, and for a terrifying moment, It seemed as though the Elysium would be torn apart. But just as suddenly as it had begun, the energy pulse stopped, leaving the ship adrift in the nebula. For a moment, there was only silence. "Is everyone all right?" Aaron asked, his voice strained as he looked around the bridge. "We're okay," Lyra replied, though her face was pale. "But the ship, it's not. We've lost power to most of our systems, and the engines are offline." Aaron cursed under his breath. "Can we fix it?" Lyra nodded slowly. "It'll take time, but yes. We'll have to manually reroute power and repair the engines, but it's possible." "Good," Aaron said, standing up from his chair. "In the meantime, I think we need to find out what the hell that thing is." As the crew worked to repair the ship, Aaron and Lyra prepared for a mission to explore the ancient structure. They couldn't leave until the Elysium was operational again, and there was no way they were going to sit idly by when the greatest discovery of their generation was right in front of them. Armed with advanced scanners and protective suits, the siblings and a small team of their best explorers made their way toward the structure in a shuttle. As they approached, the strange feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. "This place gives me the creeps," one of the crew members muttered, his hand hovering over his weapon as they landed near the entrance of the structure. Aaron nodded in agreement. "Stay alert. We don't know what we're dealing with." The entrance to the structure was massive, its doors towering over them like the gates of an ancient fortress. Strange symbols lined the walls, their meanings lost to time. As the team approached, the doors slowly began to open, as if sensing their presence. "That's not ominous at all," Lyra muttered under her breath. With weapons drawn, they stepped inside. The interior of the structure was just as awe-inspiring as its exterior. The walls were lined with
Chapter 1, The Encounter. The alien girl stood in the sterile, futuristic lounge of a hidden spacecraft, her blue-tinted skin shimmering under the soft, diffused lights that filled the room. Her sharp, luminous eyes scanned the human before her, unimpressed by the false bravado he attempted to maintain. The air was still, but the tension was palpable as her entourage, equally enigmatic and dangerously beautiful, watched from the background, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Human," she spoke in a voice that was at once melodic and chilling, her gaze piercing through him as though she could see past his skin and bones. "Show what you're hiding under your clothes, dirty animal." Her words were not a request but a command, underlined by a layer of contempt that only heightened the divide between them. The man stood frozen, his mind racing. He had been captured by these alien women, these ethereal beings with their perfect forms and flawless beauty, only hours ago. The technology they possessed was beyond anything he had ever seen, even beyond anything his government had dared to dream of. He was a spy, an expert at uncovering secrets, but now he stood on the other side of the game, a mouse in a trap. What do you mean?" he stammered, trying to buy himself a few seconds to think. The alien girl narrowed her eyes, her lips curving into a mocking smile. She moved closer, the silver-white strands of her hair falling elegantly around her flawless face. "You know what I mean, human. There's no use pretending. We've seen what you hide beneath those rags you call clothing. We've studied your kind for longer than you can comprehend." He swallowed hard. Was it some kind of advanced scanning technology? Did they know about the hidden transmitter embedded in his skin? Or was it something deeper, something more primal they sought to uncover? The others in the room moved closer as well, their movements synchronized and graceful, like predators circling prey. They had him surrounded, and escape seemed impossible. His heart pounded in his chest, not only from fear but from the overwhelming presence of these beings. Their beauty was unnatural, almost painful to behold, like looking directly into the sun. "Do as she says, human," one of the others hissed softly, her voice carrying the same disdain as the leader. "Show us your secrets." Chapter 2, Secrets Unveiled. The man hesitated, his hands shaking as they reached for the zipper of his jacket. He glanced nervously around the room, looking for any opportunity to make a break for it, but there was none. Even if he could escape the room, where would he go? He was on their ship, possibly light years away from Earth. His only chance was to comply, to figure out what they wanted. He unzipped the jacket slowly, revealing a simple black shirt underneath. His body was tense, and his mind was racing. Beneath the fabric of his clothing, just under his skin, lay the transmitter, a device so small that even the most advanced Earth technology couldn't detect it. But these aliens, they were different. They had scanned him, examined him, and yet, they hadn't made a move to remove the device. What were they really after? As he peeled off the shirt, he could feel their eyes on him, not in a way that felt voyeuristic, but as if they were analyzing every muscle, every pore, every heartbeat. Their expressions were unreadable, their perfect faces giving nothing away. The alien leader, the one who had spoken first, stepped even closer. Her icy blue eyes locked onto his bare skin as if searching for something unseen. "You think we're interested in your primitive weapons, your crude technology," she scoffed, her voice dripping with superiority. "We're not here for your tools, human. We're here for something much more valuable. Something your kind has yet to understand." His heart skipped a beat. What could they possibly want? What could he have that was more valuable than the intelligence he carried? "You still don't see it, do you?" she continued, tilting her head slightly, as if amused by his confusion. "We're not interested in what you hide under your clothes. We're interested in what you hide under your skin, under your mind." Chapter 3, The Mind Trap. The words hit him like a freight train. His mind? They wanted something from his mind. The fear intensified, but so did the questions. How could they access his thoughts, his memories? Was this some form of telepathy? The leader reached out, her hand hovering just above his chest. He could feel a strange energy emanating from her, a force that made the hair on his arms stand up. She didn't touch him, but it felt as if she was pulling something from him, something deep within. "You carry it within you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but her words thundered in his ears. "The key to the future. The key to our survival. Your kind doesn't even know it yet, but we do. And we will take it." His thoughts raced as he struggled to understand what she was talking about. What could he possibly carry that these advanced beings needed? His head throbbed with the strain of trying to piece it all together, and then, as if a switch had been flipped, he remembered the dream. The dream he had had every night since he was a child. It was always the same, a vast, endless expanse of stars and a voice calling to him from the void. A voice that promised answers, power, but also danger. He had always dismissed it as a recurring nightmare, a product of his overactive imagination. But now, standing before these alien beings, it felt like something more. "Ah," the leader said softly, a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You're beginning to understand." He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away, but it was too late. The connection had been made, and the aliens were pulling the memories from him, unraveling the mystery that had haunted him his entire life. Chapter 4, A Dangerous Bargain. The leader stepped back, her expression unreadable, but there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. "You've been chosen, human," she said, her voice carrying a weight that sent chills down his spine. "Whether you like it or not, you are the key. You will help us survive, or you will die." His throat was dry, and his voice cracked when he spoke. What do you want from me?" The alien girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him with a mixture of pity and amusement. "You think you have a choice in this?" she asked softly. "You're already part of the plan." Before he could respond, the others moved in closer, their glowing eyes locking onto him like vultures circling their prey. There was no escape, no bargaining. They had made up their minds, and his fate was sealed. The leader leaned in, her breath cool against his skin. "We will extract what we need, but there's a way for you to survive. A way for you to become more than you are." His heart pounded in his chest. "What are you talking about?" "You help us," she said simply. "Become one of us. And in return, we will give you what your kind has always sought, immortality." Chapter 5, The Transformation. The man's mind reeled. Immortality? Become one of them? The offer was both terrifying and tempting. Could he trust them? Could he survive whatever it was they had planned for him? The thought of living forever, of transcending his human limitations, was a dream many had, but at what cost? The leader's eyes softened slightly, as if sensing his hesitation. This is your only chance, human. The process will change you, yes, but you will retain your memories, your essence. You will become something greater. He thought of Earth, of the people he had left behind. Could he abandon them for the promise of eternal life? Could he betray his own species? But then again, did it matter? He was already a prisoner on this ship, surrounded by beings who could crush him without a second thought. The others in the room watched silently, their expressions unreadable. They were waiting for his decision, and time was running out. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do I have to do? Chapter 6, The Ritual. The leader smiled, a look of triumph flashing in her eyes. You've made the right choice. She stepped back, and the others moved forward, forming a circle around him. The lights in the room dimmed, and a low hum filled the air. The man's heart raced as he realized he was about to undergo something far beyond his understanding. The leader raised her arms, and the energy in the room shifted. He could feel it pressing down on him, invading his mind, his body. His skin tingled, and he gasped as the sensation intensified, spreading through his veins like wildfire. His vision blurred, and the room around him began to dissolve. He was no longer standing in the alien ship but floating in a vast, star-filled void. The voice from his dreams echoed around him, calling him, beckoning him forward. You are the key, it whispered. You are the beginning and the end. His body trembled as the energy consumed him, reshaping him, transforming him into something new. His mind expanded, and for the first time in his life, he saw the universe for what it truly was, an endless web of possibilities, a never-ending cycle of life and death. Chapter 7, The New Beginning. When he awoke, he was no longer the man he had been. His skin shimmered with the same blue hue as the aliens around him, and his eyes glowed with the same ethereal light. He was one of them now, but he was also something more. The leader stood before him, her expression unreadable. Welcome to your new life, she said softly. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers. He could feel the power coursing through him, the knowledge of the universe at his fingertips. But there was also a heaviness, a burden that came with his new existence. What now? He asked, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. The leader smiled, but it was a cold, distant smile. Now, you serve us. Together, we will reshape the universe. And with those words, he knew there was no turning back. He had made his choice, and the cost of immortality was higher than he could have ever imagined. The alien girl watched him closely, her piercing eyes never leaving his as she whispered, Welcome to eternity, human. Chapter 8, The Weight of Eternity. The realization of what he had become settled heavily on his shoulders as he gazed into the infinite darkness of space through the ship's transparent wall. His reflection stared back at him, a being of immense power, glowing with the same eerie blue light as the alien leader and her kin. Yet, beneath the surface, he was still human, still tethered to the thoughts, feelings, and fears that once defined him. The alien leader, who had orchestrated his transformation, stood beside him, her posture calm and commanding. She regarded him not as a newly created equal but as a tool, a weapon to be wielded in their quest for dominance. You must accept your new role, human, she said softly, her eyes never wavering from the stars. The power you now possess can either be your salvation or your destruction. He swallowed hard, feeling the unfamiliar energy coursing through his veins. I don't know what you expect me to do, he admitted, his voice betraying his uncertainty. The leader turned toward him, her expression unreadable. You are the key, as I've said before. Your very existence is now intertwined with the fate of the universe. We have battled for eons, fought against forces you cannot begin to comprehend. And now, with you by our side, we will tip the balance. He shook his head, trying to comprehend the magnitude of her words. But why me? Why was I chosen? I was just a man. A spy. She placed a hand on his shoulder, and though her touch was light, it felt as though it carried the weight of the cosmos. Because you carry within you a unique energy, a potential that even your own kind cannot see. Your dreams, your visions, they were not mere coincidences. They were the universe calling to you, preparing you for this moment. He took a step back, overwhelmed by the truth she revealed. The dreams he had experienced throughout his life, the voice calling to him from the void, it had all been leading to this. But what did it mean for his humanity? Was there any part of him left that wasn't already claimed by this alien force? I don't want to lose who I am, he whispered, more to himself than to her. The leader's eyes softened slightly, but there was no pity in her voice when she replied, "You've already lost who you were. But in return, you've gained something far greater, immortality, power, and a purpose that stretches beyond the boundaries of any human life. The question is whether you will embrace it or fight against it." He stared at her, feeling the weight of her words, the weight of his new existence. In a way, she was right. He couldn't go back to the man he once was, but that didn't mean he had to abandon everything. There had to be a way to retain his humanity while wielding this newfound power. "I'll help you," he said slowly, the decision forming in his mind. "But on my terms." The leader's lips curved into a knowing smile. "We shall see." Chapter 9. The first mission days passed aboard the alien ship, and with each passing hour, he grew more accustomed to his new body, his new abilities. The transformation had granted him enhanced strength, speed, and intellect. His mind now operated on a level far beyond that of any human, and he could access information and knowledge stored in the ship's vast database with ease. Yet, even as he honed his abilities, the lingering question of what it meant to be human gnawed at him. He hadn't spoken much with the other aliens on the ship, most of whom viewed him with a mixture of curiosity and indifference. They saw him as a tool, just as their leader did, a means to an end. But one alien, a woman named Zyra, seemed different. She often watched him from a distance, her expression unreadable. Her blue skin shimmered in the same light as the others, but there was something more in her eyes, a depth of understanding that intrigued him. One day, as he trained in the ship's expansive gymnasium, pushing his new body to its limits, she approached him. "You struggle," Zyra said, her voice calm but with an edge of empathy. He wiped the sweat from his brow, though he suspected his new physiology made sweat unnecessary. "I don't know how to balance this. I'm not like you. I wasn't born into this life. I had a family, friends, a home." Zyra tilted her head, her luminous eyes narrowing slightly. "You are not like us. But that is why you are valuable." He frowned. "Valuable? To your mission, maybe. But what about to myself? What am I if not the man I used to be?" She took a step closer, her eyes locking onto his. "You are more than the man you were. But you are still him. The transformation didn't erase your past, it enhanced it. You carry your memories, your emotions, with you. They are your strength, not your weakness." Her words struck a chord within him, and for the first time since his transformation, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps there was a way to reconcile his old self with his new identity. Perhaps there was still a part of him worth saving. Before he could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life, and the voice of the leader echoed through the chamber. "All personnel to the command deck. We have located the target." He felt a surge of adrenaline as Zyra's expression hardened. "It's time." Chapter 10. The infiltration. The command deck was alive with activity as he and Zyra entered. The leader stood at the center of the room, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. The image of a distant planet, shrouded in clouds and mystery, floated in the air, a world that had been the center of conflict for millennia. "We have found them," the leader announced, her voice commanding the attention of everyone present. "The renegade faction responsible for the destabilization of our galaxy. And with our new ally," she glanced at him, "we will crush them once and for all." His heart pounded as he stared at the holographic planet. This was it, the moment he had been preparing for. But as the mission details unfolded, doubts crept into his mind. What exactly was he fighting for? And why did this mission feel more personal to the leader than any of the others had let on? As the team prepared for the mission, Zyra pulled him aside. Be careful, she warned, her voice low. The leader has her own agenda. Don't trust everything she tells you. He frowned, feeling a knot of tension form in his chest. What do you mean? Zyra hesitated, her eyes darting toward the leader. There's more to this mission than she's revealed. I've seen the way she looks at you, the way she speaks about the key. You're important, but not in the way she wants you to believe. She's using you for something far greater than just this battle. His mind raced, trying to process her words. Could it be true? Could the leader's motivations go beyond the mission she had outlined? And if so, what was he really fighting for? Before he could ask more, the ship's alarms blared, signaling that they were approaching their destination. There was no more time for questions, only action. Chapter 11, Betrayal. The descent to the planet was swift and silent. He and Zyra, along with the rest of the strike team, moved through the dense atmosphere, cloaked by the ship's advanced stealth technology. The renegades were unaware of their approach, and the element of surprise was on their side. As they landed on the surface, the air was thick with tension. The mission was clear: eliminate the renegade leaders and secure the planet. But as they moved deeper into enemy territory, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't until they reached the heart of the enemy base that the truth was revealed. The leader, who had been at the front of the strike team, suddenly turned to face him, her eyes blazing with intensity. Now, human, she said, her voice echoing through his mind. It is time for you to fulfill your purpose. Before he could react, she reached out and touched his forehead, and in that moment, the truth flooded his consciousness that he wasn't just a key to the mission, he was the key to unlocking a power that had been sealed away for eons. A power that the leader had been seeking for herself, hidden within him since birth. She had orchestrated everything, his capture, his transformation, all to bring him to this moment. Betrayal burned in his chest as he realized the extent of her manipulation. But even as the anger surged within him, he felt the power she had unlocked coursing through his veins, more potent than anything he had ever imagined.